And the American Chestnut Foundation is going to donate some trees.
Yeah.
They were supposed to do it this past year for the planting right now, but the site's not ready yet. We got a little late because of all the rainfall. Tick already? Or?
Just a tick.
Already?
Yep.
Yeah. The overall goal of the property is to have the public here. Once we get a full-time staff out here where it could remain open Monday through Friday and the weekends. But as far as now, the public doesn't come out here unless we have an event.
Right.
But we are going to be opening up hiking trails, and the goal is to have people use all 305 acres of the property for recreation.
So welcome to the Habitat Workshop. I'm Jody Thompson. Today we are in Central Kentucky again, and we are at the Environmental Education and Research Center owned by Kentucky State University in Henry County, and I am with Dr. Richard Cristan, Professor of Forestry at Kentucky State. How's it going?
Doing well.
Nice. Yeah, so we're out here today looking at this how big is this field again?
About 3-acre field.
Yeah, 3-acre field. Helped them work on a little bit last year. I'd started to post some videos on just the clearing and the invasives management, and then I put my head down and the project was done, and I hadn't filmed the end of it. So we're back up here, being in the spring after, several months later, just kind of look over it, see what it looks like, and also just talk about what you have going on. Might help folks who are managing their own habitat. So.
And in terms of this field up here, it was a lot of invasive species. A lot of autumnal was here, Cerisa lespedeza. So we wanted to control that and get back to more a natural habitat, native habitat. And we're going to be doing some research work up here too. So what the overall goal is going to be to plant a meadow mix here, a native meadow mix with some native grasses in there and pollinator plants. And then we're going to come back and plant some native tree species. So we're going to look at possibly American chestnut, looking at white oaks, northern red oaks, some yellow poplar, some pollinator tree species like yellow poplar.
So like American chestnut has been heavily impacted for decades by fungal disease that gets into it and kills it essentially. They die back, they may resprout, but they're largely gone from the landscape except for some scattered trees that don't get very old. But you know, so that's part of your research, obviously, because that's a valuable question of, you know, like how are these hybrids going to do? Because we haven't had a lot of experience with them as they get older yet, correct?
That's where they're at right now. So they're seeing if they're still going to be blight resistant. After so many years, it's hard to say right now. And another thing to note about American chestnut, they're also a pollinator tree species too. So any kind of effort we could do to increase this habitat is going to do wonders to help us on our decline of the insect population.
A big part of this was woody invasive species management, but then you had Cerisa up here, which I didn't do any treatment on, but you guys have done some treatment on.
After Jody cleared the site, we came back through with the herbicide application of about I think it was 2% glyphosate with a 1% triclopyr in there mixed in to help with the Cerisa lespedeza, and we're going to hit it again come up this summer. And then we're going to plant the next year, so we got to wait another full year so we control all these invasives. And that's what a lot of people don't realize is they think you can have one herbicide application and then come in and plant right away. But your success isn't going to be there. You might have some species come up that you plant it, but you're still going to have invasives. We're going to hit it with another herbicide, most likely just a glyphosate here, probably late spring. That's in order to get rid of our cool season weeds. So the cool season weeds are going to be germinating right now and growing, and they're going to flourish here in the next month or so. And we're going to come through and try to wipe those out with the herbicide to control them. And then we'll come through with that summer, late summer herbicide to get those warm season weeds too.
You started out in Virginia and Florida, so you've got a pretty diverse range where you've done this kind of work.
If you want to see invasive species, you need to go down to Florida.
Yeah, it's like a botanical garden and a conservatory for invasives down there.
The thing is, a lot of these invasives are creeping further north due to the slight climate change with the climate warming over time. A lot of these species are just creeping north very slowly.
The things that you're practicing here, it's based on, you know, experience of repeated long experience of seeing this all over the place. The issue is relatively the same. So some people might ask the question, can't you just step away and let nature do its thing?
That's not a good way to go. If you just let nature do its thing, it's going to look just like this field did. And this field was probably fallow about 15 years or so, just looking at dating back the maps through Google Earth, through the maps. It was followed about 15 years,
Uh-huh.
and historically it was agricultural land. There were livestock here. And if you just leave it go, your invasives are most likely is what's going to come back. And one thing I want to note too, there is assistance out there to help landowners accomplish some of these goals through the NRCS.
So if you've heard of the Farm Bill, you've heard of NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, you know, within that Farm Bill, there are monies allocated to help folks do certain things to address what we call resource concerns. And it could be certain like water quality issues on a farm, but it could also be poor plant and wildlife habitat in your woodlands or your grassland areas, whatever it might be. You have part extension appointment, is that correct?
I do. I have a 30% extension appointment, and I'm the state specialist for forestry at Kentucky State University, and I do provide land management guidelines for landowners if they call me up and ask what they need to be done on their property. If I can't get out there, I end up contacting Fish and Wildlife, the NRCS, or Division of Forestry,
right,
to see if they can get out there and help the landowner. We're trying to lead more of a drone program at KSU, where I'm offering drone services for landowners as part of my extension appointment. So I come out to your property and fly the drone and get you updated high-resolution imagery, flowing about at between 300 and 400 feet up. We could fly.
Yeah.
And that way we could be able to pick out different spots on your property that might need to be managed differently.
Yeah.
We're using it for emerald ash borer detection, hemlock woolly adelgea if you're in eastern Kentucky, where you got a lot of hemlock trees.
You know, after May, or at least some point in May, probably late May, when the ash are really leafed out, you're gonna, and you'll be able to see those pockets of dead.
Yep,
and things like that.
We could clearly see emerald ash borer impact. I had a graduate student that looked at using the drone for picking up EAB impacted stands, and he picked up over 300 dead trees here on our property, and he had to stop because he ran out of time.
Yeah.
And he went to 50 of those plots, and all 50 were EAB impacted trees.
Yeah.
So we weren't picking up fallen oak trees, any other trees falling over, causing canopy gaps.
It was pretty reliable on what you were seeing.
Yep. Right now we're looking at bush honeysuckle primarily, autumn olives leafing out a little bit, and we're also calorie pear, Bradford pear.
Yep.
With those white flowers this time of the year. All these species pop from the drone, especially flying at 400 feet, where if you're looking at Google Earth, aerial photos like that, you're not going to be able to see this high resolution.
Right.
And you're related to, they're only flying once a year, maybe once every 2 years. So they might be flying only in the fall, or the satellite imagery from the fall, versus we could fly at any time.
The typical story is you've got a piece of property and it's covered in something and it looks overwhelming. You know, our advice is always to pick something manageable, or pick a section that you want to start with, and don't try, you know, and put things on a schedule. And what that does is that gives you a target, you know, that you can be more efficient with.
And this drone imagery and creating those maps for the landowners will do that. We could pick out certain parts of the property and then have them focus on those areas first.
Yeah.
And we could also give the images to the forester that's helping you out, Fish and Wildlife, biologists, NRCS, so it's going to be available to all of them to use for different management techniques for your property.
So we came through and we did this cut stump treatment, and this is what you know it looks like afterwards. So several months later, and you know, it's possible that the species out here, they're all species that can resprout, but the treatment method we use here, if applied correctly, you shouldn't really see any resprouting. What we're most likely to see sprouting from is seeds, so new plants. Now, we talked about using a Fecon, or forestry mulcher, if you're not familiar with the brand Fecon out here. In this particular situation, it was a little cheaper to use me. And we were initially thinking too, the initial plan was to plant that winter. And had we used a Fecon, we would not have got the level of control that was needed. And so for the initial plan, that was the handwork was necessary to prevent the resprouts that would have happened in the spring. Which you can use Fecon spray at the same time you're cutting, but it just doesn't provide quite the coverage. Any of the resprouts, they just lead to shade. And we hear the thing about invasives competition, and folks use things like nutrient competition and water competition all the time. But what it is, it's shade. Especially new plants that aren't established well, that shade leads to plant death. Going
back to your Fecon, the forestry mulcher, I'd say if the property was a little larger, it would be definitely cost beneficial to do it that route. And if you're good with the equipment, you can go and rent these forestry mulchers from Bobcat and other locations, other vendors.
Yep.
And it's easy for the landowner to do themselves.
And I've contracted Fecon work out myself for different reasons. And when you have a big area with a lot of dense growth, a lot of mulching or cutting, especially material that you really need to be out of the way, it is something to really consider. It's a very valuable tool. And it's not just this big machine that comes in and like just tears up everything. These forestry mulchers can be used for very precise work. A good operator can take, you know, a shrub, a tree, right down to the ground with minimal to no soil disturbance.
That's a good point. And another thing to add, these are actually beneficial for the environment because you're chipping everything on site. You're mulching it, so you're allowing all that mulch to be back into the soil to decompose and provide nutrients for your next planting that you're doing.
I guess I did a really bad job. I left this multi-floor rose. I'm glad he didn't see that and fire me on the spot.
But it's the only thing we've seen so far.
Yeah,
and
so far.
Most of the
so
field.
far. So I'm going to have to get him in and out of this field really fast so he doesn't see the other stuff. But essentially, this is how the project ended up. What kind of drone is this?
This is a DJI Inspire 2.
Yeah.
It is a more professional series drone. So that's what we use for a lot of our research. We use this one and our Matrice 200.
Yeah.
But there are a lot cheaper drones that'll do similar stuff at are anywhere from $400 to about $1,400.
And you have this one in particular because you said it's versatile.
It is versatile. It holds a little more payload, so we can put those bigger cameras and sensors on it. Where they're smaller drones, we'll still have 4K high definition video and images, but you can't put all the different sensors on like this drone could have.
So what kind of drone is like their favorite YouTuber likely to be using?
The common YouTuber, blogger, real estate person that uses drones, they're going to be looking at the DJI, the Mavic 2, and then also the DJI Phantom 4.
Yeah.
And they're usually that $1,100 to $1,400 price range, and they come with everything you need. And the only thing you pretty much have to buy is a tablet, an iPad, Android device, or you could use your cell phone.
So does it go through like a boot up sequence?
Yep. Once we go load the flight plan, it'll go through a checklist, and it'll check off if we meet all the requirements. It's ready to go now, so I'm going to hit the go button. Now it's going to go to 350 feet. And once it reaches 350 feet, it's going to go to the starting point and start flying a grid pattern. And when it's doing the grid pattern, it's going to take a picture about every second. And then from there on, I'll collect the images, go back to the office, and run the mapping software.
So this is a 3-ish acre field. You're not having to move, so how long will it take for it to do this about?
This is said it was about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And overall it's going to be about 8 acres total, because I'm flying a little buffer zone around the field.
Nice. So that really cuts down on somebody having to do like a survey on their property. Now there's sometimes there's no beating eyes on the ground. You got to get real close to things.
Yep.
Obviously, but sometimes we're doing work when we only have to get an overview of what's going on, look at things from a little coarser scale.
And this is a quick way to do it. And a lot of times the image will be here too, so you can see a live feed of what your property looks like. So you necessarily don't have to fly in a grid pattern. You can just send it up and start surveying.
Yeah.
And what we're doing, it keeps us from having to walk the whole property at the beginning to go look for things. Now we get the aerial assessment first, and then focus our management at particular areas of the property.
Oh, there's a tick. Feel a tick crawling up my leg. Yeah, I did not spray. I always do that beginning of the year. I'll like first 2-3 times I go out, I'll just not spray and like curse myself and the ticks for every time, but still not do it for some reason. Yeah, you can send your clothes off to somebody and get them treated, and they're good for like so many washes.
Yeah, you could get permethrin you get at Walmart, Cabela's, Amazon, and it's the same thing. You spray it on your clothes the night before, let them dry,
Yeah.
and it's good for 6 weeks or 6 washes. The drone's done. It was 8 minutes 53 seconds.
8 minutes 53 seconds, and now it's coming back in for a landing,
Yep,
right?
it'll come and land itself, and I'll only take over if it's not going to land in a similar area.
Yeah.
Usually it's within 1 to 2 feet of where it took off.
So we came down to another part of this property, the Environmental Education and Research Center, to look at another research area. You see behind me, you see all these white tubes sticking up out of the ground. So within each of those tubes is a tree seedling, and Dr. Cristan is about to fly the drone again to get imagery so we can monitor this research project over time. But this was an old grassland installation, probably a wildlife mix. There's the drone. So what, you'll go back up to 350 feet again?
350 feet, yep.
So what determined 350 feet?
We have to stay below 400 feet.
Gotcha.
That's just regulations. So I try to stay 300 to 400, just stay above the tree canopy line to be on the safe side. And it adjusts for altitude above the ground. So as it's flying, it'll adjust for that to account for the difference. So when it flies over to the hill, it'll go up to 300 feet.
Okay.
And then when it comes back towards us, it'll start coming down.
Tree tubes, sometimes they're called tree shelters too, are common to use in this kind of practice, especially at like a conservation scale. Obviously you can use them, they are used in landscape in some, but you're typically working with plant material that has like a bigger crown in that case. But in this case, what's their main purpose?
So the main purpose here is for deer browse. So we're trying to protect them from getting browse, from getting the top of the terminal bud, getting snipped off. You want that terminal bud to stay intact so that tree grows up in the air.
Yeah.
Without the terminal bud, it's going to grow widthwise instead.
Does it also help with like antler rubbing?
It
Things
does,
like
yep.
that?
Any rubbing on it. We do have some horses that come over here from the adjoining property.
Yep, I've
So
seen
that's
those
going to
horses.
help with them rubbing against them. And for the tree species, what we're planting here are yellow poplar and persimmon to look at pollinator species, and also white oak and black walnut to compare them to more timber species.
Gotcha.
And we also have a native grass and wildflower study incorporated in this plot too, or this field.
So in that grass and wildflower, those are going to be seeded soon, right?
Yes.
Those will go in between the rows.
They'll be in between the rows, so we're about more in an agroforestry type spacing, where we got 25-foot spacing between tree rows.
Okay.
And we did 2 treatments last year where we bush hogged only and did a no-till planting. We did a spring herbicide and planted for a second treatment. And then a third treatment's going to be installed this year, and that's going to look at a full season herbicide.
And so your main question, do you have just one main question, or are you trying to answer multiple questions with this?
2 questions. What's the best site prep? Is it the longer herbicide season, or is it going to be a different planting rate? So we're looking at 3 planting rates too.
Okay. Planting rates from what? Like you talk about the trees, the wildflowers and grasses.
The native grasses and wildflowers. So we looked at 7 to 10 pounds per acre of seed. Yeah, these come in flat sheets. So they come in a box. They're kind of rolled up, and you just lay them out, stick them in the sun for a couple minutes, and they get a little more maneuverable. And you just maneuver them into a cylinder. And if you look on the back side, there's a bunch of zip ties where you could zip tie them shut.
Yeah.
And the reason we went with these is because we're going to want to remeasure them every year. So we need to get the diameter and heights, and this makes it easier for us to get to the diameter than a solid tube. This same company makes a solid cylinder tube, and it's a lot quicker to install than having to put them together. But we wouldn't be able to resample. We'd damage the tree trying to lift it up.
You're almost always going to use a stake. Sometimes you'll see the stakes on the inside.
Stakes are going to be the route to go, like Jody said. You could use the fiberglass poles, but they can kind of bend over time, and with the wind, and harder to pound into the ground. And the bamboo tends to break down too much. The bamboo is really cheap, and if you only expect to have it out there a year or 2, then that might be the way to go. And now the white oak stakes, you get pine treated stakes, they're going to last for many years.
Yeah, and so how long will you, like typically, so what'll happen is these things will typically come up out of the tree tubes, and folks may remove them at different times for different reasons. How long are you guys going to have these on?
They'll be on just so they're high enough for the deer browse once we get it out. And the tree, having them in the tree tube kinds of make them more microclimate inside, so they're not going to be adjusted to having this off right away. So it's going to be key to remove it at the right time, because oftentimes when you take these off, that tree seedling could actually fall over.
In landscape situations where you can get like fertilization, more organic material, and irrigation, you could see a little quicker establishment, which just means the roots are growing into the surrounding soil environment. These trees won't establish for till after year 2 at least. But rule of thumb, we typically tell folks don't expect establishment until at least year 3. Is that how you guys are looking at it?
Yeah, these trees, they're going to be putting into roots the first year, so they're going to be trying to spread out the roots a little bit. You're not going to see much growth in height. The second year we might see them a little higher, but we're probably looking year 3 and plus before we're going to see them on top of these 5-foot tubes. You can get them anywhere from a foot up to 6 foot. And most recommendations with high deer browse is at least 5 foot. Some people tell you 4, but 4 foot's going to be like right here, and a deer is easily going to browse the top of that.
There's a white oak right there with the this deer browse. They just snipped the top of it off. So that top part's a little more softer, a little more appealing from a food source.
Especially in the springtime.
Yeah, yeah. You said these were just recently. This part of that was recently planted.
Yep.
Yeah. So that happened in the past week.
Yep.
So here's some more. Yeah. Is that white oak again?
Yep. All this is white oak with pink flags.
Yeah.
All these are. They just went down the line.
It's just grabbing it off the buffet.
Yep.
All right, folks. Well, that's what we got for you. Hopefully this is something useful to you. So let's get out there and get something done. And remember, great habitat can be anywhere. We'll catch you next time.